Well, here you go with some more of the insanity going on in America right now. What you're seeing before you is biblical scripture being fulfilled. What you've got here is a lot of protesters, the type that Stalin called useful idiots. In other words, there's probably a lot of well-meaning people in this crowd, but they are coming out in support of not that which is righteous, but that which is self-righteous. In other words, they feel that there has been wrong done. And they feel it's been done because they simply do not have all the facts. I mean, these people that you're seeing here are in Union Square, New York. They did not attend the trial. They probably didn't even pay attention to the trial when it was on television. As you've seen a number of times on some news channels, they will go into crowds of people like this and ask them about events of the day, such as Benghazi, or where Benghazi is, or the NSA scandal, and the people have no idea about it. So many of these people here are what is known as useful idiots, as Stalin would call them. In other words, Stalin said that Americans were useful idiots that could easily be manipulated if their system was broken down and they were pandered to and given entitlements and fed little tiny bits of socialism until they finally succumb to it. And what you're seeing here is an example of that very thing. Look at the pictures of people protesting here and the professional signs that they're holding up. And you'll notice here, Workers' World Party. Workers' World Party. And look at the colors used here. The same colors as the communist flag. Gee, I wonder if that's, coincidence. And then, of course, you've got old red hair here. Anybody remember who was hairy in the Bible and who became called red? That was the good old Esau. But you've got crowds basically of parrots here echoing what they've heard, not knowing the facts, calling for revolution. And you've got these professionally made signs, and these people would have you think that they're just spontaneous protesters. Well, these signs are not spontaneous. This sign might be spontaneous, but this sign is not spontaneous. This sign is not spontaneous. Probably about half of this crowd are what you would call paid protesters. I mean, they're professional protesters that go from one place to another place to another place. Probably half of them are SEIU Union or some other group. And they're not protesting because they're really angry. They're protesting because they are paid protesters. Just as we covered in an earlier thing that the DOJ through the CRS, Community Resource Action Group, or whatever it was called, get together, and especially in a bastion of, total brain power like New York City, where everything that is right is made out to be wrong. In other words, it's a blue state. It's full of liberals and socialists. Nonviolence is the answer, she says. Gee, does that look nonviolent? That looks like a police car smash to me. I'd say that's pretty violent. And that really doesn't look like it's nonviolent. Busting people's windows and busting up police cars seems to be, fairly violent. And here again, here's some more. And even spray painting on the window there, if you can see it. FYC, I don't know what that is, or FY something. Another window smashed out here. This guy looks like he's, maybe they're cleaning up their store, but this guy looks like he's carrying a stick. This is in Oakland, California. Now, when was the last time that you saw, let's say, a group of Caucasians get together and do something like this any time a verdict didn't go their way? Well, you haven't. You've got certain groups of people that are more easily moved to do things like this because the socialists in this country are pushing racial strife. That's what they want. That's what they thrive on. And here you've got another crowd carrying signs, walking, demonstrating. This was in Georgia. And oh yes, we have to put Skittles in our pocket because after all, Trayvon was only 17 years old. Of course, he was 6'1" and, about a foot and a half taller than George Zimmerman. In other words, the rule of law doesn't mean anything to these people. The judicial process doesn't mean anything to these people. They have been convinced for years that the rule of law does not work for them by people like Jesse Jackson and Al Sharpton and others, the NAACP and the real racist of this society, I might add, the Black Panthers. Trayvon was stalked. Ayanna was sleeping. Well, Trayvon was not stalked. Trayvon was the aggressor, as was proven in the court of law. He was not stalked. He was in an area where he was not supposed to be, and a neighborhood watch saw him and started following him. However, it was Trayvon who initiated the contact and began the fight, which ended him up dead. But these people are not going to see that because all they're looking at is racial division. They don't care about justice. They don't care about the truth. I can imagine a scene like this roughly 2,000 years ago where people yelled, "Give us Barabbas! Give us Barabbas!" In other words, right today is made out to be wrong, and wrong today is made out to be right. If you read the books or the chapters of Isaiah chapter 3 and Habakkuk chapter 1, you will see what is going on here. Isaiah chapter 3 and Habakkuk chapter 1. I urge you to go and read those chapters. This will explain exactly what you're seeing before you here. And this is just a small amount of the pictures that there are to see online. We are all Trayvon. Isn't that special? We're all Trayvon. No, you're all alive because you didn't go and trespass in a neighborhood where you didn't belong and get shot because you attacked the neighborhood watch. A man who aforetime, in other words, before this incident, was well thought of, even amongst the black community, which he had friends in the black community. and he was a mentor to black children, but all that is forgotten. Any good that a person does is forgotten whenever the racial line is crossed. In other words, had this been the opposite, had a white man been gunned down, a white teenager, even if he was in the wrong, had he been gunned down by a black man, there would be no rallies like this. Whites wouldn't get together and protest and say, Jonathan Smith, well, we're all Jonathan Smith. No, you wouldn't see that. This is political. This is nothing more than political. And it's part of a thing, or a group of things that were set in order many years ago. There's a handbook called The Path to Socialist America, which is covered in a movie called Agenda, the documentary, The Grinding Down of America. And it explains the benchmarks and the things you would need to bring down a nation. And one of them is to cause racial strife whenever possible. And the people that you see here are referred to, in the words of Stalin, as a quote from his time, way back in old Soviet Russia, as useful idiots. In other words, the easily moved, the quick to judge, those who don't have all the facts but move with knee-jerk reaction. And they get together and protest, feeling that they are doing righteous work, feeling that they're in the right. But when you are coming out against an innocent man, which George Zimmerman was acquitted, and he was acquitted based on the evidence. Whereas most of the time in the obverse side, in other words, the other side of the coin, if someone really does real crime, and they aren't convicted because the lawyer used an argument like they had a bad childhood, or they were raised wrong, or their parents beat them, or they were beat up in school or whatever, you get revolving door justice. But when a man is righteously freed for doing something that he felt was right, in other words, being a neighborhood watch, then these people, or these kind of people, don't understand it. And you've got a multitude here. This is not one race. However, there is racial strife being created here. In other words, now justice is black and white. It's just like the old adage that these so-called reverends and civil rights people like to push. They say that racism cannot be committed by a person of color. It can only be committed by a white person. Well, that's a lie. As we saw during the elections when the Black Panthers tried to prevent people from voting. But you see, you only see what the media wants you to see. And the media is pushing this and hyping it as much as they can. As a matter of fact, they are inciting this. So, what can you say but God help us? This is Scripture being fulfilled. Right is made out to be wrong, and wrong is made out to be right, just as written in our Father's Word.